Your progesterone is fine, your prolactin is normal, but your free testosterone and total testosterone are pretty low.
Wow.
Your dihydrotestosterone is really low too. I think the last time we looked, these were not low.
I don't feel like I don't have a sex drive though.
I know, right?
What's up guys, Derek, moreplates.com. Today we're going to be talking about the general trend I've seen in the keto and carnivore communities, this sort of overlap in the lack of acknowledgement of free testosterone relative to total testosterone levels. So something I've noticed a lot is this, hyper focus on total testosterone levels and a complete lack of acknowledgement of sky high SHBG levels that seems to be very, very common in their blood work. And I'm not anti-keto, anti-carnivore, anti-anything. It's just interesting how even the experts sort of just like glance over this stuff and kind of, will just say something like, oh, your SHBG's through the roof, but it's fine because it means your IGF is low and your insulin's low. So you're, metabolically healthier than everyone else. And it's like too much or too little of anything is not going to be good. Like there's a middle of a sweet spot for a reason, or at least somewhere where you are optimized and not necessarily too far in one or the other direction in terms of performance versus longevity. And some of these guys I feel like are on the, total polar opposite side of the argument in terms of this SHBG thing, and they have like the weirdest justifications, like, oh, like look how good my total is, but then some of these guys have like hypogonadal level free testosterone levels, and they're touting their diets as the fucking savior to hormones, and it's like to me I just don't get why it's being overlooked. Like it seems like such an obvious thing. So just some of the I'm open-minded to keto, to carnivore, to everything. And I just don't get why this is being kind of like skimmed over like it's nothing. Like the free androgens are the things that are actually bioavailable to tissues to actually do their job, essentially. And, people looking at their total hormone levels in the serum, it's not like it's reflective of what they actually need, biological actions being induced in target organs and stuff. It's just like a number on a piece of paper, and it's factoring in hormones that are bound up by sex hormone binding globulin that cannot really, reflect the actual activity going on in each tissue, like I said. So some of the people I just wanted to bring up that I found, kudos to all these guys for actually showing their blood work, like regardless if it's, if it's in their favor for whatever, diet practices they recommend or, I don't know, advocate to clients or whatever it is. The first guy is Ben Greenfield. So this is like a very popular biohacker. I guess is what he's called, but it's more like he's essentially just like, a health and wellness expert who knows, he's like a jack of all trades when it comes to knowing about whatever the cutting edge is in health and performance. So in particular though, he used to do like really competitive Ironmans and stuff, and was like, he's done a lot of low carb dieting throughout the years too. So not only did he used to run himself into the ground through, like marathons and whatnot essentially, but he would also do very low carb diet models, which he still to this day incorporates to some extent. I was actually just going through some of his blood work to kind of see how it trended since then, and since he stopped the competing and sort of just been doing the, longevity research essentially on himself. So in like 2017, he had a 225 total, which is hypogonadal, a 16.5 free, but notably a 79 nanomole per liter SHBG level. And moving forward, after all, they stopped the Ironmans and stuff, as far as I know, by this point in September 2018, his total testosterone jumped up to 881, which is obviously much better and is reflective of not like driving your body into the ground with all like these, insane hardcore competitions he was doing, I guess. But his SHBG is 84, so it's even worse than it was. And it leaves his free at 78.5. So that ratio is like you're looking at female territory SHBG levels. And then you could, like I said, you could argue, well, he's low carb, so he has low IGF, so he has, higher SHBG, and it's reflective of being more metabolically healthy. But it's like, at the end of the day, if you're trying to balance health and performance and kind of meet the, the sweet spot in the middle, this isn't it. Having an 84 SHBG, in my opinion anyways. And moving forward to Shawn Baker, a lot of people have asked me to look at his blood work because he's one of the, I think Ben actually had an update in 2019 of his blood work too. And this was after 12 weeks of strict carnivore diet. So not just like low carb, like just strict carnivore. So he had a 33 estradiol, a less than 0.2 luteinizing hormone, 79.8 free testosterone, 841 total T, and a 63 SHBG. So again, even on carnivore, which is probably a similar, maybe not exactly the same as what he was doing prior, but it's, very low carb. That's like technically keto, I guess, versus what he was doing before. Like his SHBG is still higher than it should be for a man. His total is good, but it doesn't really matter if your total is good if your free is in the toilet because your SHBG is binding it all up. And then your estradiol too. Your ratio of estrogen to androgen, I should say free estrogen to free androgen, you have to consider, and something that goes totally unaccounted for here too, estrogen doesn't have the same binding affinity for SHBG. DHT has a 5 times higher binding affinity than testosterone. So his free DHT is probably fucking trash. And then on top of that, the free T binds with way higher binding affinity than the estradiol. So you have a bunch of free circulating bioactive estradiol and estrogens, but when you actually get to the androgen portion of your hormone profile, it's less and less biologically, bioavailable hormones to actually get to where they're supposed to go. So the ratio of actual free androgen to free estrogen is very suboptimal in this case. So this is somebody who is like the pinnacle of health and performance here with this hormone profile, which is certainly not optimal in my opinion. Now we move on to Shawn Baker, who has been criticized heavily for his brutal blood test results, but I'm not even going to look at the, the lipids or anything like that. I'm just going to look at the testosterone because that's kind of just what this video is about. So he's, clinically hypogonadal looking at his levels. He is 237 nanogram per deciliter total testosterone and a 5.5 picogram per milliliter free testosterone using a immunoassay for his determining what it was as far as the assay that was used. So again, like for him, obviously everything's just in the toilet, so it's not really a good reference point anyways. Like it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that something's wrong in both scenarios here. But again, it's like the SHBG is not being even evaluated in this. He's just talking about, even in his interview where he discusses his results, he says, let's see, or actually I'll just play it and then you can hear it for yourself.
And like you've had people relate to you that they expected you to have like a testosterone up in the, like 1100s, where the testosterone ended up, the total testosterone was 237. The free testosterone was 5.5. Am I reading that correct?
Yeah, they were low. They were low. I repeated that actually again, and they were a little bit higher, but still low. And this is an interesting thing, and I think we see this across the low carb community. Now, here's what I'm seeing, Rob, because I've seen a lot of other people's labs on this, and I think a lot of people, as we know, cholesterol is a precursor for sex hormones, and a lot of people are seeing actually their testosterone rise, particularly initially. I've seen people with 200-point rises going on a carnivorous diet. I think that's interesting. I think what happens long term is that you become sensitized to, your receptors become extremely sensitive, just like your insulin receptor becomes extremely sensitive, and also probably your thyroid hormone becomes extremely sensitive, and probably things like leptin and all these other sensitivities that go up. And I would argue that perhaps that is a good thing if these organs are not being required to continuously pump out hormones, maybe running at a lower background level, but having the same clinical effect might even be a more efficient way to do things. And of the things that we know increase androgen receptor sensitivity, carnosine features heavily in that. And so obviously I'm getting a lot of carnosine in meat. lifting weights, resistance training will raise your androgen receptor sensitivity, as will, infrequent meals. So intermittent fasting or long time between meals, all of which I do. I spend, I usually eat twice a day, so I don't eat very often. I don't snack. So all those things have been shown to dramatically increase the androgen receptor sensitivity. And so to the point of, what is my clinical testosterone function? I mean, obviously I'm strong, I'm big, I've got a lot of muscle mass. I'm continuing to put on muscle mass and strength even now. And, from a sexual performance, I wake up every day with an erection. I mean, every single day.
So anyway, it's a lot of bro science in there, but, maybe what he's saying holds merit. I don't know. Probably require further exploration, but personally, to me, it sounds like nonsense. Especially when we know what up-regulates AR expression. It's certainly not deprivation of androgens. So moving forward to the next example that I had was Carnivore Curt. He is somebody who did a consultation with Paul Saladino, and Paul is actually one of the, maybe even perhaps the, foremost face of carnivore dieting. He basically, well, I guess maybe him, Shawn Baker, and Michaela Peterson, some of these other, people who have had drastic changes, not only to their own lives, but to, their clients' lives and whatnot. But this guy, he recorded his progress on a carnivore diet and had very extensive blood test results to evaluate how his before and afters. And he had Paul on this, Skype call to kind of go through it with them. And here they go over his change in testosterone. So his testosterone after starting carnivore actually got nuked in this video here. And this is after 6 months. And we're going to go through kind of like his progress over like a year of carnivore, and I'll give you my stance on it after.
Your prolactin is normal, but your free testosterone and total testosterone are pretty low.
Wow.
Your dihydrotestosterone is really low too. I think the last time we looked, these were not low.
I don't feel like I don't have a sex drive though.
I know, right?
But having lower testosterone after eating all that protein seems like kind of counterintuitive. I think it was at 600 on the Nutri-Eval.
It was what?
I think it was 600 before.
Yeah, I think it was 600 on the SpectraCell.
Yeah, the SpectraCell is like 600. How did it go to half?
I don't know. Maybe some people may have a different phenotype where they get more sensitive.
One thing too, though, Paul, I think my diet leading to this test, my diet did go a lot more protein heavy, and it was less fat heavy than when we did the SpectraCell. So maybe that reduction in fat on the diet, which is coming back now, might shift the testosterone back up.
And then, so basically his testosterone got nuked. And notably is the ratio too. Like if you actually go and look at this calculation, I'll pull out my phone to calculate it here, show you the percentage. So typically you would see 2 to 3% of your total testosterone as free, as fully freed up testosterone to exert its effects in tissues. So if you have a healthy SHBG level, you'll probably be somewhere in the ballpark of 2 to 3% of your total as free. So with him, he has a 2.75 nanogram per deciliter free testosterone level and a 315 nanogram per deciliter total. So if you just do 2.75 divided by 315, he has less than 1% as free. So even though let's see, I don't think his SHBG is even in this test result, but we can tell just based on his free and the proportion, like obviously on paper you can see your free and your total are low. Yeah, everyone can see that. But notably, one of the underlying issues too is this ratio of free to total. So he's not only borderline hypogonadal, but he also has a shit ton of SHBG binding up the free androgens. And his DHT, it's low, and that's total. I can't even imagine what his free DHT is. It's probably in the toilet. Moving forward, he does a video called How I Tripled My Testosterone in 3 Weeks on the Carnivore Diet. And he basically goes through how his testosterone in May was before he started carnivore was 687.5, which is what he talked about in the video that we just watched. Then he started carnivore in 2018 of November. And then in June 2019, when he did that test result that I just showed you where he had the 315, he had been carnivore for a while in June 2019. And then for 3 weeks, he changed some things, and basically he increased calories, I think, added more than 1 meal a day. I'll play it out and then you can hear what he says he did here.
Probably 400 to 1,000, and I was down below 400 at 315. So I was really at the bottom edge of the low end of the range of where you'd even want to be. And it was kind of concerning. In that consult, we talked about a few things.
Your progesterone is fine, your prolactin is normal, but your free testosterone and total testosterone are pretty low.
Wow.
And your dihydrotestosterone is really low too. I think the last time we looked, these were not low.
I don't feel like I don't have a sex drive though.
I know, right?
But having lower testosterone after eating all that protein seems like kind of counterintuitive.
I'm going to show you in a few minutes here as we go into the video and get into the meat of this what I did, but I bumped my testosterone in that period of time in less than 4 weeks. I re-pulled my blood back in mid-July after pulling it towards the middle end of June. I went from 315 to over 900. It was like 910 in a period of less than a month, which is insane. Insane. It's just like, obviously keep in mind, if you're pulling testosterone early in the morning one time on your blood, and then you're doing it again in the evening, another time in your blood work, or you're eating a lot of, say, high cholesterol, high fat, and you're having a ton of sex, and then you go and pull your testosterone, it could be a lot higher. It could be spiked, or it could be dipped depending on when you're pulling it if you don't have a lot of sleep. In both of these scenarios, I feel as though we pulled a very accurate test. I had not worked out the day before. I had focused on getting at least 2 to 3 nights of consistent sleep at the same time, fairly well regulated, both times leading up to it, and I didn't deviate my diet beyond the changes I made during that period of testing to kind of see where I was at. So I feel as though it was fairly controlled in the sense that these were good samples of the same situation of the day when you would have pulled testosterone measurements.
So he basically shows how his total testosterone went from 350 nanograms per deciliter to 911, and he's all stoked about it, and the carnivore diet's all sick, and it's the best thing ever. So
I was working with Paul and going through these labs.
So these are the 3 things he did that increased his total up to 900 plus.
Probably the biggest thing that we did was increase my calories. I was on OMAD, which is 1 meal a day, for roughly 2 months, about 6 to 8 weeks leading up to my fasted blood draw when I did the first panel, and after being on carnivore, and saw my blood work showing my testosterone below 350. Caloric restriction can be great for longevity, and doing OMAD, which is 1 meal a day, can be awesome for certain things like cancer prevention or disease, sort of cleaning out the body.
So he goes through here why having, more calories essentially is going to, if you're depriving yourself of energy, you're going to, have a harder time producing sex hormones. It's why, females lose their period and whatnot when they're preparing for bodybuilding competitions and stuff. A lot of it is just your body sensing that you're not in a good environment for having a kid, so it basically is going to prevent you from doing that, or at least that's the proposed hypothetical mechanism. He goes through what else he did to change it and blah blah blah, but at the end of the day, so when you actually look at the blood test result though, the total is 911 nanograms per deciliter, which is all well and good. You fix your deficiencies and macronutrients essentially and are producing hormones again. But look at the free and look at the SHBG. The SHBG is 104 nanomoles per liter. This is a ridiculously high SHBG and proportionally a suboptimal free testosterone level. It's better than it was in terms of just sheer number, but it's still a suboptimal ratio and suboptimal proportion of free androgen to free estrogen. And I would, love to see what his free DHT relative to his free estrogens were here too, but you can just calculate it yourself based on extrapolating the data here. But again, this guy's carnivore diet is not helping him reach optimal endocrine, balance essentially. I'm not gonna say it's not something that you should pursue or do at all. I'm just saying that from the standpoint that everyone is touching on, oh, look, you know, it's so good for testosterone levels. It's fucking shitty if you're trying to maximize your testosterone levels, actually, from what I can see. So next we have 12-month update from the same guy, and he's going through his blood test results with co-founder of Root Causing Health, Nathan Owens. And they're going through here. They're going through his hormone panel here.
Estradiol, I don't know why that would be low, but that seems fine. I mean, I'm guessing you're just not eating stuff that has, you know, hormones in there.
Okay, that makes absolutely no fucking sense. If you're not eating stuff with hormones in it, no, it's that you're not aromatizing enough estradiol. You have some sort of deficiency upstream that is preventing proper aromatase expression, or perhaps your hepatic, you know, clearance of estrogen is, you know, it depends, but I mean, it's not something to overlook and just skim over. Like, that's probably fine. 11 picogram per milliliter is like cardiotoxic estradiol levels. And again, you would have to look at, you know, intracrine and like tissue specific levels if you really want an accurate measurement of what's going on in the heart, the brain, the whatever. But just relative to his total, proportionally, if you had a 703 total, which is what he has in this blood test result here at the 12-month update, an 11 is brutal. Like, that is like menopausal levels almost. For a girl, not for a guy who has healthy testosterone production. So I don't know why he would say, well, I'm assuming he just doesn't know, and it has absolutely nothing to do with you're not eating the hormone. Like, what the fuck?
FSH looks good. LH is in range. All of these, testosterone's pretty high. Free testosterone's good.
Okay, the free testosterone is not good. The total testosterone is fine. A 703 nanogram per deciliter test level I'd be happy with. However, if I saw a 6.61 free with a 703 total, I'd be wondering, what the fuck? Is my estrogen through the roof and my SHBG is high now? But no, his estrogen is actually low and his SHBG is still cranked, which I'm going to get to in a sec.
Percent free, wouldn't really be too worried about that.
Didn't you say, Nathan, there was like an insulin correlation with one of these?
Yes, that's sex hormone binding globulin, yeah. But okay. My guess is with the testosterone, like, you have plenty of free testosterone and plenty of regular, you know, bound testosterone. So my guess is that on, you know, a carnivore diet, it's possibly the case that your sensitivity to testosterone is increased, so you don't actually need as much.
That would make sense.
Still within the reference range, so no issue there. Sex hormone binding globulin, SHBG, is correlated with insulin sensitivity. So the more insulin sensitive you are, the higher your SHBG will be.
Okay, so yeah, your carnivore diet, if your insulin levels are lower, it's going to have a very direct impact on IGF-1 production, your SHBG levels, which is downstream going to affect a lot of anabolic related processes. Not necessarily in a positive way. Like, obviously we don't want to drive, like, a lot of people, they look at SHBG like, oh, look at, you know, PCOS, and you look at all like the low SHBG levels, and SHBG is the devil, and like, not SHBG is the devil, but that if you drive it into the ground, it's a sign of, you know, metabolic syndrome and this and that, and you're insulin resistant. If your SHBG is, the higher it is, the better. And it's like, it's definitely not, there's a sweet spot of everything for every person. And sure, the reference range is just a general average guideline to begin with, but to say that a guy who has, let me see what 6.61 is. 6.61 divided by 703, not even 1% of his total T is freely available to tissues. That is not an optimal percentage, and it certainly would be worth looking at closer, and especially with this flagship standout sex hormone binding globulin of 103.5. Like, if you actually look at the reference ranges for men versus women, females, it's up to 144 nanomoles per liter. For men, as you can see here, it cuts off at 55.9 for him. So he has a normal SHBG for a girl with a shit ton of estrogen in her system, but for a guy, it's definitely not good. Like, if you're trying to maximize performance. So no, this is not something to skim over. Just because your free is in the reference range, it doesn't mean you are optimized performance-wise. Now, interestingly enough, Paul Saladino published his blood work results too, and his SHBG was through the roof as well, and his free was in the gutter. And then he added in boron, which has some interesting clinical data to back its efficacy potentially for lowering SHBG, but it makes you wonder, why is your SHBG so far out of range to begin with? Is it perhaps that the diet model may not necessarily be conducive to all the things that may be, you know, the perfect intersection of health and performance, and maybe it's too focused on one or the other? You know, it makes you question, because if everything is so, you know, ancestrally congruent with what is the best thing for our ancestors, like, why do you have to take a boron supplement to drive your SHBG down? I don't know. Anyway, I'm not gonna, again, this is just my stance based on some of the arguments I've heard. Like, I have nothing against carnivore. I may even try it one day. Fuck, who knows? But I don't necessarily like how they portray it's so good for for testosterone production when you see these guys consistently, their SHBGs getting fucking cranked through the roof. And then I guess this is a more recent podcast where Paul talks about another friend of his, Nathan's free testosterone levels, and they talk about their own here.
So the next one that I guess we can talk about is sex hormone binding globulin. Mine was pretty high. It ranged from 45 to 57. The reference range goes up to 50. And I believe on your last podcast with Tommy, he mentioned that it essentially tracks with insulin sensitivity.
It does track with insulin sensitivity. I would not characterize your SHBG as high. I would characterize it as normal. Women tend to have higher levels of sex hormone binding globulin. And perhaps that's something that I should mention in this podcast, that the reference ranges for some of these things in the hormones will be different for men than women. But SHBG, if you look at the differential diagnosis, there's a differential of high SHBG and a differential of low SHBG. Basically, a low sex hormone binding globulin is something that people get when they are hyperthyroid, I believe, and insulin resistant. And a high sex hormone binding globulin is something that people can get when they have hypothyroid or they are insulin sensitive. And so if the sex hormone binding globulin is out of the range or in the range, then we can look for those causes. But most of the time I see it within the range. The reason we think about sex hormone binding globulin is because it binds up free hormones, and there is the possibility that free hormones are the active hormones. And so
here he basically outlines how he has high SHBG, which is consistent with pretty much, you know, most people's blood work that are doing carnivore. Paul goes on to elaborate on how being a bit outside the reference range is not a big deal for SHBG, but then later, about 5 minutes later, he goes on to say how he's only worried about total testosterone when it's outside the reference range. So I don't really get where the two, you know, conflicting perspectives come on reference ranges. Like, to me, if you're looking at bioavailable androgens versus your total androgens, like, shouldn't the reference range be just as important on either side of the spectrum in terms of optimization? Like, I understand you're trying to differentiate between literal hypogonadism and optimization with SHBG, and, you know, you can't really, apparently you can't stay strict carnivore and keep a reasonable SHBG level, so I guess it's just kind of getting glanced over. But I mean, I don't really get the conflicting, you know, perspectives here on putting different levels of importance on it, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, this is what he had to say on that, though.
I hear the same thing from people. I don't get worried about testosterone unless it's lower than the reference range and people are having symptoms of erectile dysfunction for men, or low libido for men, or even for women too. And the reference ranges for women are going to be totally different for testosterone, but this is relevant as well because women can have low libido related to low testosterone, and it can be related to the same things.
So basically an overarching conclusion on all this, which I just think is interesting, is how this is a very common trend, it seems, for this, you know, cranked up SHBG, not just carnivore, but on the keto diets too. And, you know, is it going to be optimal for longevity versus performance? And where's the intersection between the two? You know, that's up for interpretation. And ultimately, if you know, feel good and you're otherwise healthy and you're maximizing your health with whatever diet practice you choose, by all means, that's probably the one for you. But to me, it's just interesting how this commonly gets glanced over, and for, like, it seems almost like a selling point for some of the diet advocates, in my opinion. Like, oh, it's so good for testosterone levels. But it's like, it's the very thing that's throwing off the ratio of bioavailable androgens to estrogens. So to me, I don't know. I just feel like more clarification should be owned in on that. If you have to resort to exogenous supplementation of boron, or like throwing in like fucking Proviron or something to get your SHBG into range so you can get enough free testosterone proportionally to your total to actually maximize your performance, you know, it's kind of defeating the purpose of what is supposed to be the overall best diet practice for, you know, muscle building, vitality, you know, erectile quality, libido, etc. You know, perhaps there are merits to it in certain aspects in terms of autoimmune diseases, you know, tons of stuff that it obviously has proven, not proven, I guess, you know, scientifically, but I mean, like, anecdotally, there's been enough positive, you know, anecdotal case reports at this point that I think it definitely has a lot of positive weight behind it. But the SHBG portion and the testosterone thing, I feel like should be elucidated further and owned in on, especially by the people who are experts in the community that look at the blood test for this stuff. So anyways, take from that what you will. Thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe, check out my blog, moreplates.com. If you want to support the channel, you can check out anything I'm affiliated with in the video description below, as well as my turnkey nootropic and pre-workout formulas that I develop myself. I literally sit on a Word document and write out these formulas and bring them to you guys. If I didn't own this company, I would be otherwise buying most of these ingredients separately and just mixing them up in my kitchen, to be honest. So hopefully you guys enjoy that. If you check it out, really appreciate your guys' support on the brand as it grows. Follow me on Instagram at moreplates_more_dates, Facebook, Snapchat, BitChute, Twitter, TikTok, Apple Podcasts. If you follow the podcast and you drop a 5-star rating, that would be very much appreciated as well. And if you want to get sent blog articles when they get published, they are far more elaborate and as well as organized than my videos. They have concise subsections with table of contents, citations in them that are hyperlinked for you to go delve into the clinical studies I reference further yourself to, you know, further your own education about pharmacology or nutrition, longevity, whatever it is I happen to be talking about, hair loss, whatever it is. So thank you guys for watching. Talk to you soon.